Hello and welcome to Taking Liberties Radio, episode 33 for season 5. My name is Lee, I'm in Western Australia. This week I'm joined by Vickers.
Yay!
Hey.
Hello.
Now, we're going to try and cover 3 topics this week, all while the video is still giving me grief. So apologies to any YouTube watchers, I'm going to try and fix it up as we go along. But let's start off, let's talk about New Zealand, our friends in New Zealand. Who have decided they are going to start demanding people's phone passwords at the border. They are currently...
Not just phone passwords, any electronic items. Now, so there is some context to this. So libertarians were incredibly surprised to hear when I pointed out to people and actually linked the relevant law in our criminal code. You're actually required to do it here in Australia. In fact, I think Kevin Rudd was Prime Minister when we passed that. Yep. Like I'm talking ages and ages and ages ago. And I remember cracking the shits then about it as well. So we've had to do it for a long time. Americans have had to do it since 2004-ish. Canadians have had to do it since before. Since about that time as well. And the UK did it, I think, a year before we did. So New Zealand's pretty much playing catch up here. So there's a lot of hyperbole on this one where people go like, so now if I go to New Zealand, they can ask me for my passport and password. It's not actually that. It's badly reported, which is kind of understandable because it is, it's civil liberties reporting, which means go hyperbole rather than actually talk about what's going on. Yep. So what it's actually talking about is if the government seizes your equipment, right? Like your computer. If it seizes your computer, if it seizes your laptop, if it seizes your phone, right? It is a criminal offense for you not to give them the password when they've seized it.
Yep.
Right? It's an additional criminal thing. So that's what it's actually talking about. It's got nothing to do with when you enter, they're going to get your password.
Yeah, so it's not they're trying to do this to everybody. It's just that they now reserve the right to, reserve themselves the right to be able to do it. Which it's an extension of the obstruction sort of charge. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So and if you look in Australia's criminal code, you'll see obstruction followed by this one. Yep. So So it's nothing new. It's basically it's effectively
it's still like
it's bad. Shit. It's shit, but it's not applied to people. It's not applied to people until you've lost it. Right? So it's one of those things where you've been charged and you're basically being like a dickhead.
Okay.
At that stage. It's like where after you've been caught sort of thing.
Okay. So
it's not like they'll go, hey mate, that's a nice phone. By the way, now if you don't give me your password, I get to charge you with something. What you mean. Yep. It's a I've seized your phone and I'm going to charge you with something unless you give me the password. So there's a misunderstanding about the reporting on this and I kind of looked up the proposal and went like, yeah, this is pretty much pulling New Zealand in line. But libertarians everywhere were like going, oh, this is awful. New Zealand's like going apeshit and stuff like that. I went like, yeah, I can see if you read the reporting as it was reported, you would be like that, but that's not actually what it's doing.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a requirement there, which is kind of skipped in the reporting. And like I said, we do have that law here in Australia. We've had it for a while. It's not used with any respect even close to this. In fact, it doesn't even relate to what people are talking about in the sense that you've never heard of that story happening here, right? Despite us having this in the book.
Yeah, but I mean, it is one of those things that it would probably be likely to happen and, it may not just be reported on. So
Oh, no, 100% happens.
Of legal, powers, police powers
sure.
Exercised constantly, but you don't ever hear about because it's never dramatic. And that's guess one of the issues. Like you think about something like a move on notice, which is, I think in all the states, police can basically just get you to move on and arrest you if you don't. There's very little oversight. They can do it to harass people constantly. Yeah. It's pretty awful, but unless like somebody prominent or unless it's like a protest group, it rarely rises to the level of people actually caring enough to sort of talk about it.
Sure, but it's even like take a look at the context of what it's used, right? So what when it's used is like, hey, I've had to seize your phone, right? So or seize your laptop, right? Under what circumstances can they seize the laptop, right? So and this is at the border, right?
Yeah.
So if they're seizing your laptop at the border, it means one of three things: terrorism, drugs, or no, it's actually two things: terrorism or drugs.
Well, smuggling in general, some sort of contraband.
Yeah, something. So basically, smuggling or terrorism. Those are the two reasons they basically drag you across. Now, the powers that they give for those two things are significantly worse than this little itsy-bitsy little charge that you've got at the bottom of it going, if you don't give us your password, you've got to pay a fine. Right? I'm just like, the grand scheme of powers that they've been given, like this. It's like this little tiny thing, right? That's there for the police convenience of like going, give me your password or else. Yeah. Right, and it's not as if, and it's just this little sliver of a charge they can charge at the end. So I kind of sit there going like, okay, sure, we can get upset about this, but first of all, let's understand the context of what it's been put in and report it accurately. Right, I'm not saying that it's a good thing. I definitely oppose it. I'm just saying libertarians are being absolutely shit by arguing about this one thing, right? When the big thing is still there and we don't talk about it. Right, so we should be talking more about
libertarians do talk about it. I mean, I guess that's what makes us different from, say, other people who might be upset by this, is libertarians do talk about those things a lot. I mean, obviously, given my stance on the culture war, I think libertarians could still talk about it more. I think it's...
So this is actually where I'm actually criticizing the LDP, because the LDP doesn't actually play this stuff front and center.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think it is an expansion of power that is... I mean, it's probably not unprecedented, but it's certainly, it's not... It is a small thing in the scheme of things, but, within the borders. Like, if you're not at customs, generally speaking, they can't force you to incriminate yourself. And that's effectively what they're doing here. I mean, that's... Generally, the principle is you're not required to incriminate yourself. And the expansion from the borders into regular life, that kind of law, that would be a substantial change. That would allow a lot more people to be charged. Because, maybe at the borders, there's, people are generally pretty orderly. There's generally not many fights. But, if you expand that outside of the borders and it's like you get in a scuffle with, some guy at the pub, you've now been arrested, they're going to try and, for whatever reason, they want to access your phone, which incriminates you. That's quite a substantial change. And certainly when you look at the US, where it's like, by Supreme Court fiat, anybody within 100 miles of the border, which is basically like 80% of the population in the US, have no Fourth Amendment rights. Like, they can essentially do this kind of thing at any checkpoint, anytime they like. They could basically just get you to hand over your devices and to search them.
And get the passwords, yeah.
So it's. I mean, I don't think it's unreasonable to think of this as the thin end of the wedge. This is the kind of thing where...
This isn't the thin edge of the wedge. The wedge is already there. This is the little splinter at the end of the wedge.
That's why it's called the thin end, because that's the metaphor. So...
But it's not the thin end. It's on the other side. It's at the end of the wedge. It's the splinter at the very end.
Well, I mean... So
this isn't the start of
No, I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But when you talk about the escalation of the use of these powers, of the war on drugs, of terrorism, of general over-criminalization of everything, this is the kind of thing which it changes it from being, okay, most people are unaffected by this. Unless it's really obvious, like unless you're carrying a big bag of weed in your car, you could probably get away with a lot of things. And this kind of law changes that from, you can sort of live your life even if you break the law, to at any time they like, they can come and harass you. They can go searching for things to charge you with. And I mean, there's lots of laws that aren't just around drugs and terrorism, which you can be incriminated from on your phone. I
was going to say, like unexplained wealth laws and stuff like that. Yeah, so to be fair, like I was sitting there going like, this is why I don't think it's the thin edge of the wedge at all, because this is that slap thing at the very end of it. This is the consequence of you not playing ball with all of that stuff that they've done at the beginning, right? So I'm just like, this is the splinter at the end, right? Okay. This isn't the beginning of the wedge, because all of that stuff has happened, right? They've seized your property, right? Now, this is just like they've seized your property, and now they're saying, if you don't cooperate with us, right, we're going to charge you with something else.
I disagree with that characterization, but I guess we can agree to disagree on that one.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we just quickly talk about some of the things you can actually do if you're concerned, because there's people that we probably know of who are involved in, say, drug policy stuff. Who basically people who might be targeted. And the key thing is, thankfully, most phones you can download all of your data onto your phone after it's been wiped wherever you are anywhere in the world. So I think the main thing is, if you're concerned about this kind of thing, is wipe your device. Do a backup, wipe your devices when you enter the country, then reinstall everything on your iPhone, reinstall everything on your.
See, there's a big presumption there that they can't get your password to the cloud, and they're not going to ask for that once they've seized your phone.
But if your device is empty,
yeah, sure.
So that's from what I understand. From when talking, and this is actually in the context of the US, where they can just willy-nilly search you, take your phone, whatever, and copy all of your data off your devices onto their computers, is to just take over an empty smartphone. Just like wipe the contents, and then start from scratch once you enter the country, and then you have some sort of due process rights.
Yeah. So that's actually been, anytime I go to the US, Israel, or the UK, I pretty much take a wiped smartphone.
Yeah.
And that's been my mode of travel forever. And that's because of similar reasons to what you said. I don't have anything to hide. I just don't like people checking out my phone.
Well, and the issue is actually, it's all good and well to think that you have nothing to hide, but how do you know that? I mean, this brings up James.
I know that because I have a wiped. I know it because I have a wiped phone.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, that's true. But like the one of my favorite videos of all time, which I'll absolutely put it in the link in the show notes, is James Duane. He's a professor in the US. He says, never talk to the police. And one of his key points is, even if you think you're innocent, you don't know what they could have on you. And there's lots of things that they can go digging for, like the whole 3 laws a day. Every person breaks 3 laws a day. There's lots of stuff out there which you think, oh, I've got nothing to hide, I've done nothing wrong, but actually, in US, you could be charged under the law for breaking US law because you broke an international law. So there's this thing called the Jones Act, which is, if you break environmental law overseas, you can be charged in the US.
That's got to be something the Democrats put into place.
I have no idea, but you've got things where the Gibson guitar company got busted because the wood they sourced was from a particular country and they broke some law over there. It's just crazy. Anyway, let's move on. Let's talk about Brett Kavanaugh. So we talked about him last week.
We're going to talk about him again. And we're going to talk about him next week. We're going to talk about him all the time now.
No, we're not. This is the last one.
Yeah, he's America's favorite frat boy at this stage.
So
he's been confirmed.
Yeah, he's been confirmed. The kind of the catalyst for that was there was a FBI investigation, which I don't know if it had been asked for by the company reported. But
no. So
yeah.
Yeah, so so a week ago, the Democrats basically played chicken, and they went like, why would you support a investigation? This was in Kavanaugh's testimony session, and he basically said the FBI doesn't make decisions; they report on witness statements.
Yeah.
It's up to this committee to make a decision.
Yeah,
right. And then he said so you wouldn't oppose an FBI investigation? And goes like, I am forced to go by whatever the committee's recommendation is on a way forward on this.
Yeah.
Those were his exact words, right?
Yep.
So they played chicken on this shit, and he said, you do what you guys got to do effectively. Yeah. That was in a very long way.
And Jeff Flake, who was like a Republican senator, he was sort of a key swing vote. He requested the FBI look into it, and they didn't find anything of any substance because, well,
there wasn't anything of any, there was nothing to begin with. Everybody knew that. The FBI does criminal investigations. Everybody knew from the beginning this thing from 36 years ago, right? Based on one person's statement, right, which wasn't corroborated by anyone else, was never going to meet the requirements for a criminal case. Mm-hmm. Everyone knew that. Yeah. So I don't know why the Democrats played with this played chicken with this. Right? You're talking to a lawyer and going like, how would you feel about an FBI investigation?
Well,
it's just like,
except that their goal is not based on evidence. It's not based on, it's based on getting a result, but it's not based on any kind of due process. It's about
it's actually based on trying to delay it.
To delay or to get him to withdraw, or to essentially just set up the narrative that every decision that is now rendered while he's on the Supreme Court is now illegitimate because he's a rapist. So, I mean, more or less, the Democrats kind of got what the best they could really get, which is he was always going to be confirmed because it's a Republican Senate and a Republican president. And now they've just kind of dragged him down into the mud through the entire process in the hope that, well, maybe it will affect the legitimacy of ongoing decisions.
Yeah, except as far as I can tell, and people have been looking at the polling data and stuff like this, it's actually, so the Democrats are expecting a blue wave and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What this case has done is really re-energize the right, right?
Well,
so there are
very re-energized both sides, really.
Yeah, but keep in mind, typically in a midterm election, the side that's in power has trouble drawing voters out because there's fatigue going like, oh, our guy's already in parliament.
Yeah.
Sorry, already in Congress.
Yeah.
Or already the president, right? So they have fatigue for that. So right now, they're like, so I've been watching like various Republican groups that I'm members of, like doing massive vote drives and going like, we've gotten another 3,000 people registered. And I'm sitting there going like, oh, that's for a midterm, that's super impressive.
Yeah.
Like, these are like in rural areas. This isn't in like city areas. So I'm sitting there going like, it could end up being that there's like, certain, particularly in Florida, I think there could be upsets for the Democrats who are hoping that this would be their thing to rally their base to bring more members out.
I mean, it kind of depends, as we found out with the presidential election in 2016, it depends where the enthusiasm is. So, Trump won essentially because Hillary depended on the enthusiasm in a few key states, in essentially areas, and she didn't end up getting it delivered to her. So it's
no. It's because if you take a look at it, Trump's strategy, to be perfectly honest, if you take a look at where Trump went, it makes zero sense, right? Unless you're like making really long odds and going like, because he went to Wisconsin, which is a deep blue state, right? That's the Rust Belt. That is like as democratic, it's union, it's like it's union, it's manufacturing workers, they are pretty much a core constituency of the Democrats, right? Why would a Republican presidential nominee go out there?
Yeah.
Right? Seems like a waste of time and money, but he went out there.
Yep.
Right? He had rallies out there, and that was one of the states he carried.
Yes.
Right? So, like, when it comes to presidential campaigning, I can't make sense of Donald Trump. Right? It doesn't make any sense, and it's not even always successful. It's not even always successful. Right? Yeah. It's successful sometimes. It's successful more than. So, it's not.
The point of me bringing it up is just to say that, like, like winning lots of votes is not enough. Winning votes in the right places is what matters. So, if all the existing, the people who are already in the House, Democrats in the House, get massive, voter drives in their seats, that's great. But you need increases in voter enthusiasm.
Marginal electorates.
The 50-something seats they need to get back to the House. They need it in the, 3 states they need to, to win back the Senate.
Yeah.
So no, 2. Yeah, they need 3 seats.
It's 2 states.
Yeah. So like it's and we see that in Australian
because they're 49.
Well,
it's 49 to 51.
We see that in Australia as well. Like, I mean, there's basically maybe a dozen key marginal seats which determine whoever that dictates who wins government, because it's and if you look at that bottom end of the marginal, we're talking 100 votes. I mean, I think I remember in one of the recent federal elections, there was literally 126 votes was the margin. So I guess that's the real question of, Democratic or Republican enthusiasm is great as long as it's in the right spot.
My main objection, though, so I do have an objection to Kavanaugh winning, and it's because Kavanaugh, and there's a Reason article that goes through this. So Kavanaugh's really good on the Second Amendment, but here's the thing: I don't think being good on the Second Amendment even counts anymore, right? With the clear exception of Ginsburg, right?
Yeah.
The entire bench has reaffirmed Second Amendment like several times over. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So Ginsburg is the only one who would fucking throw it out the water, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you've got Kagan and Sotomayor who are like, we can maybe, maybe an assault weapons ban might work if you do this.
Sure.
Yeah. So like that, they'll play around.
I think the other key strength, from what I understand of Kavanaugh, is he's talked about, much like Gorsuch, talked about kind of the Chevron doctrine, which is essentially I think we might have mentioned it last week. Essentially, it's whenever there's an unclear statute, the courts will essentially interpret the statute to fit the interpretation of the administrative, like the bureaucracy that it's a part of. So, if there's a bit of unclear environmental law, then the interpretation of the EPA is what the court will affirm, which essentially gives wide latitude to the state.
government.
So Gorsuch is, I think, actually on record of saying he thinks it should be overturned, or at least should be re-examined. And from
Which
what I
one? The
understand,
Chevron doctrine?
The Chevron doctrine, yeah. And I think Kavanaugh is much the same of sort of questioning whether that's a good way. And I mean, really, there's an awful lot of stuff that goes through the courts that's based on administrative law. I mean, it's Roe v. Everybody talks about Roe v. Wade. Everybody would talk about Citizens United and all these big cases. But like the bulk of the court is going to be of the court's work is going to be in that kind of stuff.
But Kavanaugh went through that during his testimony. I asked him about Roe v. Wade, and he goes like, even if I wanted, like, I think he basically said something along the lines of, even if he wanted to get rid of Roe v. Wade, right? Roe v. Wade isn't even the law that gives women the right to have their abortions, right? There's a whole bunch of case law on top of that.
Griswold or something, anyway.
Yeah. He goes like, Roe v. Wade is ancient history, right? It's got nothing to do with the courts these days. And he goes like pro-life, even if you overturn Roe v. Wade, you're not going to get back to. Why do I have cat fur? Sorry. Even if you I just noticed cat fur here.
Okay.
I don't have a cat.
That is a mystery then.
So like he made a lot of points during his testimony, which first of all I went like, oh yeah, that's actually a good point. I hadn't considered that.
Yep.
The point where he raised about polygraphs being not admissible in federal court. Now that was something that confused me because Democrats constantly talk about how polygraphs aren't used in federal courts, but they're used in state courts, and they really should stop using them, right? And they kept using Dr. Ford's polygraph and going like, she took a polygraph, why don't you take a polygraph? Yeah. And he's just like, they're not admissible in federal court. Yeah. You can be coached.
Yeah. Pro tip to anybody out there who's not aware of it, polygraphs are full of shit. It's really easy. With about 40 minutes of training, you basically can beat any polygraph you want ever.
And
if you take drugs.
Yeah, and not just that, but like, the polygraph. So if you're a first-year psychology student, you know exactly how to fake it. Like you learn as an undergrad how to fake them.
Sure. And, right. Well, I think we made that point last week about her being a professor of psychology. So just, get back to the sort of the actual jurisprudence side of things. So, I mean, the best argument I'm aware of is essentially his attitude towards administrative law. But yes, for you and me, I think we would be very concerned about Fourth Amendment. That's the key thing where Kavanaugh is no good.
I mean, he would massively give he would just give them carte blanche approval to run through and surveil everything. Yeah. And that's my main objection to him. But you know what? Like I sit there going like Second Amendment and his position against regulation. That's fine. Yeah. But like that's not unusual on the High Court on the Supreme Court.
The administrative law thing, they're very. I mean, the fact that the Chevron doctrine exists demonstrates that the federal courts are extremely permissive towards, and that's before you even get.
Oh wait, you're saying he opposes the Chevron?
Yeah, he opposes Chevron doctrine. Yeah. That's the argument.
Oh, you know what? On balance, that might actually swing me around the other way to accepting it.
Yeah, I mean, unless I've misunderstood what I recall in the actual commentary, not about Christine Blasey Ford.
But see that confuses me. Then how can you be against this? Sorry, you can be pro the surveillance state, but against interpreting things in favor of the government's. Sorry, the departments. Comes from
people are inconsistent.
Yeah, that's a weird inconsistency.
I mean it's. Well, I mean you get guys like what's his name? The guy that died, Scalia. He notoriously. Was this like hardcore right wing, conservative, but he was also, he was really good on privacy, if I recall correctly, because so like, but then on other stuff about like I think cops testimony, and there's all this other stuff where it's, on the criminal justice side of things where it's like there's a bit of an inconsistency. So I mean that's just how people are, and let's move on. We're going to try and get through 3 topics. We're going to do 3 topics. Let's talk about grievance studies. Scandal.
Oh, yeah, that was great. So to be fair,
okay. You say what you think, and I'll go for it. You explain it.
Yeah. But you've got a differing opinion.
Well, this is where, okay. You just say your thing, and then I'll
Yeah.
be
So
forming my
basically,
thoughts.
what happened is a bunch of academics did. It's similar to the vein of the SoCal experiment, which was a thing on postmodern papers way back in the day, where a mathematician basically published crap onto sociology journals and managed to get it published. Now the difference here is it's the same sort of thing. It's a bunch of academics. They published about 20 articles. They got
But they
seven of
tried to get published 20 articles.
yeah, they tried to. Sorry, yeah, they submitted 20 articles for publishing.
Yep.
7 of them got published before they called it off, and I think 4 of them also was it 4 or 3? 4 of them got quoted in future ones.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's what that's what prompted them to stop, was when other people were citing their crap.
Yeah. So, like, going by the article that you shared of their actual, their article, which they talk about their thing, they said 7 papers were accepted. 4 were published online. 3 more had been accepted without having had time to see publication through. 7 papers were still in play. 6 were retired as fatally flawed or beyond repair. 4 invitations to peer review other papers as a result of their scholarship. And there was like recognition.
Yeah, they declined. So, they declined those ones. Yeah.
So 7 wrote 20 papers. So I mean, it's still not even. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's published. Like we're talking. I mean, how many articles in this field? So it was all about gender. So we should point out, there was one which was like quoted Mein Kampf and redid it in intersectional terminology.
Well, that was the one that got that one was the one that got published in other places. I think it was. Okay. So which one? Yeah, so that was the one that got published in the 25-year anniversary of that journal.
Right. Okay.
And was what was it called? What was the quote? The most important thinking in feminist, like the most feminist significant or whatever it was. It was hilarious. But anyway, the point is basically there were people quoting them in big literature pieces.
Sure. I mean, but there's a lot of like my feeling. Like I just don't think it's a big deal. Like I mean, leaving aside like the issues of are there issues with intersectional, blah blah blah, which obviously there is in any kind of ideology. There's going to be people who are not open-minded or whatever. I just kind of think, well, okay, 7 papers out of how many that are published this year? I mean, how many articles, like not even just them, but we're talking probably hundreds of articles that get published every year in this field. And, okay, it maybe might expose some aspects of the peer review process, which failed.
I think that's exactly what they're saying, is the peer review process is failing.
Well, I mean, no, I think in their article they're talking about, it seems they're trying to make a bigger claim about the nature of this whole field of study.
Well, the bigger point is, so I think they're making 2 points, right? Like the first thing is the peer review thing, but they've got an entire section there where they're going like it's actually indistinguishable to tell the real articles from the crap, effectively. The part 3 is basically how they're going through. Like it's actually really hard to tell the difference between their articles and some of the other articles that were there that were legitimate.
Maybe,
but I don't know. Yeah, but the thing is, but they don't say like how it's difficult.
Yeah,
and that's the part where I go like, you lost me there. I mean, I agree with you, but you've lost me.
Yeah, I mean, this just kind of seems like regular, just.
This just so from my perspective, this is just the academia trolling the academia and doing it in a somewhat humorous way, which is what SoCal did, right? For anyone who's not aware, the SoCal experiment was basically an explanation into why postmodern journals will just publish anything, right? Because he posted a whole bunch of crap, right?
Yeah.
And they published it. So he was just like, yeah, they'll publish anything. And the postmodern journal's response back was, well, we thought it meant something.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just kind of... This is obviously fodder for, it's a bit like James, what's his name? There's a guy who tries to go undercover to kind of troll the media. And it's a similar sort of thing where it's
oh, God. You're right.
Yeah,
I can't
but whereas
remember his name.
it's good fodder for National Review and Breitbart and
I actually think
Quillette
this
and
is
all of these kind of
this-
right wing.
this isn't necessary. No, this isn't attached to the right wing, dude. This is technically, this is the science, the STEM schools effectively taking a shot across the bow at the sociology school again. This is not. It hasn't
Well,
got
maybe
anything.
it
The
even-
right wing is just jumping on.
Sure, yeah. But so that's what I'm saying. Like, this is going to get a lot of play with the Andrew Bolts of the world.
Yeah.
Who, I mean, the real way to, if you really want to critique these things, there's probably a better way than producing hoaxes. Like, an actual rigorous study into, I don't know, like, I mean, I don't know how you do it because I'm not against this kind of stuff and it's not my field of study. But I'm sure, like, there's actually, like, you could go about it in an actual rigorous fashion of, maybe
A hoax is actually a rigorous faction. Like, okay, so here's my question.
I don't think so.
Here's my question. Why do you never hear about a great hoax in the STEM fields, right? Like, because it doesn't happen, right? Because what happens is...
Ooh, okay, keep going.
No. Because what happens is, when things are found out to be wrong, right? Like, the thing is, there's a whole bunch of evidence that goes into proving that something is correct. Okay, right?
Sure.
And everything that gets published in STEM is notionally correct, right? Until someone finds a better explanation, right? So it's just like all of the STEM stuff is just a giant ledger of here's the latest information we know, and it just gets replaced with new information, right? The way sociology treats its journals is more like an article of faith or like, this is correct, right? As opposed to this is what we know. And that makes the difference. That's why a hoax being injected into science journals impacts them in a more adverse way than having a paper that is technologically incorrect in STEM.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess like one aspect is like a hoax is a deliberate thing. Like this is a deliberate strategy. It's not like they just wrote a bunch of stuff and just accidentally submitted. They were targeting these journals.
Yeah. Okay. So it doesn't really happen in STEM because people...
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, how much does that happen in STEM? I guess you could say there, you get situations like there was a biotech company where it was basically just fraud. Where they were promising all this genetic testing and all this sort of stuff. And a Reason's got a great article. So like
there's outright fraud.
So you get that kind of stuff, which is, I guess, deliberate in the sense, but it's not deliberate to. They're trying to sell a product that they know is wrong, rather than they're actually trying to sort of mock people for like what they believe. So you do kind of get that sort of thing. So
you get outright fraud, yes.
Yeah, and maybe people who sort of talk.
But the thing is, in outright fraud, it's still discovered by the same process. It's not discovered by someone going, "Ha, I got you."
Yeah. Well, in that case, I think it did. Journalists started investigating the company, and they found out that it was just completely full of shit. But I mean, I guess that's also different from academia, where academia is a much more closed environment. It's not.
Yeah.
It's going to be much harder for journalists to sort of go in when you're not having to produce publicly available records, which you can, which get issued to shareholders, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So like, you probably don't see many hoaxes in the field of physics or whatever.
That's not to say that you don't see them. You do see them, but like they tend to cover it very quickly.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, and that also. I mean, let's also be clear. I actually don't think of social sciences as sciences. Like, I think it's much harder to. Like, it's if I drop my phone on the floor, it's gonna, like, I can test to see if it's gonna break or not, and I can repeatedly drop my phone until it breaks, and I can, that's the nature of the physical sciences. When you start talking about various forms of sociology, the study of people, be it psychology, be it whatever, you can't do that. Like, I can't put you in a lab and like test this stuff on you, and in a way that would work in the real world, because that's not how humans operate.
Yeah. So this is the thing. This is why, like, despite the fact that I'm all on board going, like, I'm in mostly agreement for this, because these are people from my school of academia, and obviously I pretty much agree with them already to begin with.
Yep.
But like, I sit there, like, I'm with you on like this, like, the point of a hoax isn't real. Like, you're right that a hoax doesn't necessarily prove that. Sorry, doesn't prove sociology is a bunk sort of science or whatever. But I mean, using
basically, just to sort of interrupt,
using the scientific
it comes across
method,
as anecdote. Like, it's just anecdote. I mean, that's why I talked about sort of having more rigorous study of these things. Is that a hoax is a really good way of, like, creating an anecdote where you've got a limited situation.
Not an anecdote. No, it's not an anecdote. It's a data point. It's not a trend.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a data point, not a trend.
When I sort of brought up the idea of having a bigger survey is that, yes, in this instances, in these journals, with these articles, the system broke down, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Like, it could just be those were bad journals or those were bad peer reviewers, where, some sort of more rigorous sort of study into these things, or just discussion of ideology,
Sure. But that's not what they're looking at, right? Like, they're just saying, like, they're trying to prove that there isn't a process. So that it's not. You're right. It doesn't prove it across the entire field.
Yeah.
But that's not what you really need to do. So this is a data point, right? Like, really, this goes to like standard regression. You don't need to prove every data point, right? That's not how you prove regression. You need to prove, across a longitudinal study. You need a few data points to prove a regression. And you don't need every data point.
More substance as well.
Yeah. So I mean, to be perfectly fair, I think they've got the right methodology. I just think that they need to expand it out, right? And they need to have they effectively need to pile more crap through the system to see if it catches it out.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that might be one way of going about it. Another way is just, let's talk about ideas. Like, rather than I mean, we've had a whole discussion where we haven't hoaxed anybody, and we've still discussed the merit of those ideas. Probably not to the in depth that you might if you were taking it on in a serious fashion, but there's lots of ways of approaching the idea that intersectionality is stupid that don't involve hoaxes. Like, you could just talk about the ideas, and I mean, in the end, like, if you think this stuff is bunk to begin with, you're going to be like, oh, this hoax is great, and if you don't think it's bunk to begin with, you'd be like, okay, so what? I don't know how many people would be like have their minds changed by this.
I think you and I have two different aims here. I don't want to prove that. I want to prove intersectionality is bunk by finding bunk and proving that intersectionality is indistinguishable from bunk.
Okay.
Right. Sure. And to do that, a hoax is a really good idea, because just like I produced a whole bunch of crap, you can't tell the difference between intersectionality and crap. Therefore, intersectionality is crap because they're indistinguishable.
Yeah, I think. Okay, I just think there's limits. I don't know how far you could really push that, but in the end, good on them for getting a good hoax. I mean, in the end, it's good for a laugh anyhow. I mean, that's really, if you're aiming to entertain, that's always an okay reason to do a hoax. All right, well, we've gone a bit over time this week. I will guess. Any final thoughts, by the way? Anything we haven't covered yet?
No, not really. I think we've covered this episode. But look, one thing I do want to ask people is, I've been toying around with the idea of maybe Lee and I doing something live, and we're kind of toying around with the idea: would people be interested in it? And the question then becomes like, what's the best day for us to do that? When's the best time you guys would sit there, probably on Facebook or on YouTube, and actually watch us talk about absolute shit.
Sure. Yeah. So let us know. Our Facebook page is always the place to get us, or you can comment on this video on YouTube. The good ways to get a hold of us. And you'll also, well, actually, if in the various libertarian forums, if you just tag us, well, you can't tag me because I'm not on Facebook at the moment, but you can tag Vickers. You'll probably get a hold of him as well, because we're always about. Well, he's always about. All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching, and we'll be back again next week.
Cool.